Thank you for joining us today. My name is Samira Tilley, Marketing Manager at Assemble Systems. Our webinar today will cover how BIM-based scheduling results in improved project control. Now let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Tim Kelly, Director of Partnerships at Assemble. Go ahead, Tim.
Thanks so much, Samira. So I'm particularly excited about this one today. I know there are a lot of you guys online, so we're going to get right to the heart of it pretty quickly. Today we're going to run through some quick introductions, go through some basic concepts about this integration between what Assemble provides and the scheduling concepts. I'll do a quick demonstration and then we'll get to the good stuff in the panel discussion. So just to start briefly, as Samir mentioned, I'm Tim Kelly with Assemble Systems. Today we have the opportunity to have three panelists with us. Mark Jenkins, Product Strategy Director at Oracle within the Construction and Engineering Business Unit. Kelsey Stein, Senior Pre-Construction Technology Specialist at Skanska. And Kasey Vanderlinden. He is the Scheduling Manager at PCL. I'm going to give each of these guys a minute to say hello and talk about themselves and their companies, and then we're going to dive right in. So, Kasey, why don't you kick us off?
Sounds good. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kasey Vanderlinden. I'm the Scheduling Manager at PCL, housed here in our Toronto office. As you can see, the slide on the screen, we have offices all over North America. We're the largest constructor in Canada and one of the largest in the States as well. We cover pretty much every facet of construction, all business units. Myself, I've been in construction about 20 years right now, primarily in planning and scheduling. And happy to be here today because I can see the future of scheduling. I've seen it over the last few years, and this topic is exactly where planning and scheduling is going, in my opinion. So thank you for having me.
Kelsey, why don't you run through Skanska just a bit?
Hi, my name is Kelsey Stein. I'm a VDC Manager in the Preconstruction Department at Skanska. I'm based out of Tampa, Florida, but we have offices all over the country, and we're actually internationally based out of Sweden.
So my name is Mark Jenkins. I'm Product Strategy Director with Oracle. I've been here for about 3 years, working on some of our new project controls platform called Oracle Prime. Prior to that, I spent 27 years in the construction industry as a scheduling director for 2 of ENR's top 30 companies. And I came to work for Oracle because I wanted to develop some very specific, easy-to-use tools and empower the people in the field to actually do scheduling and building information modeling.
So sort of to echo your ambition and what you are doing at Oracle, I'd say something similar for what we'd like to do with Assemble. So at Assemble, we're a building information model management system. We're a web-based product that allows our users to collaborate, to aggregate and organize the data the way that fits their workflow, to share this information with other of our partners and other products that they use in their day-to-day workflow, both in the office and on the job site. And we're excited about this progress here in the scheduling front because it's such a key component of what our users do to manage their manage their project on a day-to-day basis. So to dive right into our integration and where we're taking this, it's really centered around the core concepts of what is scheduling. It's planning, managing, and reporting on the application that's being put forth, the project, whatever that might be, whether it's some small product that's being produced within a equipment yard, or all the way on up to skyscrapers and airports and large projects. With that, the key thing around planning is we wanted to be able to dynamically map activity data, and that's where we started the discussion with Mark Jenkins and his team around how do we make this work between the two products so that you do this mapping, and as the models change and iterate, we're keeping the connection, and vice versa. As the schedule gets updated and changes, we're just keeping a direct connection. So in that discussion, we have a lot of key concepts that are in our roadmap to be produced in the future. and some of those are around how we deal with simulations and how we provide that to the field, how we synchronize data back from the field team on a mobile device back directly into your P6 schedule, and ultimately how you roll that up and report on it for use with your pay application review or your status check-ins with the owner, or whatever that might be. How do we report on that? So real quick before I jump to the next slide, Mark, you and I have kind of been going through this for a while now. Anything to add here?
Other than I'm really glad to finally get the partnership underway. It's been about a year's worth of work formulating this partnership, and I'm glad that we share a common interest in simplifying the process of scheduling and linking it to the building information model to empower project teams to do 4D and ultimately 5D scheduling.
So briefly, I'm going to run through some of these key concepts in each of these areas and talk about setting the stage a bit for the discussion we're going to have. But in general, conceptually, some of the things that Assemble allows our users to do already is aggregate quantities associated to the project across different cost codes or bid packages or other things that they might manage in pre-construction. And now in this case, as we're integrating schedule data directly across your different activities or work breakdown structures. With that said, this kind of dynamic connection more readily allows for resource normalization. So you're able to start leveling and normalizing your like activities because of that quantity data that's directly tied to those components. So in this case, we're looking at a simple example of concrete on metal deck and a daily production rate for that. And the objective is to kind of normalize things around a consistent production rate as we move through that project. Second, with managing the work, the key feature focus here is how do we get content or this information into the hands of the guys that are driving the project. And for us, that's getting it out into the field. And so mobile device ready, accessible where you can directly dive into the project details and get information that you need when you're making the day-to-day decisions. I often kind of refer to this and talk about this as ad hoc decision making. A conversation pops up with your foreman. You need to dive in and get the details, share that information out, provide visuals potentially, and have that discussion and ultimately drive that forward. And then how do you kind of report this back across the team and roll information up, whether by bid package or trade contract, by status of the job and where things potentially are, or by area by area, so you can make sure things are cleared out, ready for the next trade to begin work there. Those are some of the key ideas that we've been thinking about, and there are a lot of other features sort of baked into that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start with, this is what we've launched to date and are continuing to build out about how do we connect between Assemble and Oracle. Or Primavera P6 anyhow. With this integrator, so we have our Assemble integrator. We have the ability to download, pull down information directly from your Assemble models or Assemble views, as well as a direct connection to your P6 database, so your actual schedule database, wherever that is hosted. Really straightforward in how we're kind of creating different rules on things and connecting. It's basically as simple as selecting the objects that you want within the model, selecting the schedule activity that you want to link it to, and creating the link between the two. Very, very common kind of workflow here. But a couple of key capabilities we've built into to this, a lot of functionality around simplifying this process. So let's say in this case I select a pipe, and I'm going to just X-ray mode so we can kind of see what's going on here. What I want to do is actually get that entire line. And if I go into my properties of this object, I've got all of the properties both that directly come out of the model as well as the ones that my team has added during bidding and during pre-construction, whatnot. And I can select any of these properties here, and I can then just go grab all of the rest of the items that are part of that. And so in this case, I'm selecting the entire spool or the entire line that's associated, and now I can drop that into the activity it's connected to. Once you go through this process and map the activities, we have a review mode that makes it really easy to see what and where it's mapped and kind of navigate whether you're selecting on the model and it's giving you the activities that are selected, or selecting on the activities and it's giving you the model components that are selected or connected. The idea is that we would kind of simplify that process of maintaining mapping between the model and the objects or the activities in the schedule. From there, what you're going to do is basically push all of the schedule data up into Assemble. Once it lands in Assemble, you can do all of your group sorting, filtering, and everything else, all the other features that we have already baked into our web interface and mobile application. What we're actually working toward with this is making it really simple for this data to directly go out to the field and step through this process within the field. So what you're going to see here, and just kind of a really quick idea, is that this is our mobile application, and I'm in our schedule simulation mode, our schedule review mode anyhow. And what I can actually see is on the left side I have all the individual days for my activities, or I can roll that up by week or by month. And I can kind of select through individual weeks, and the model is going to update based on where we should be, or select the activities that should be happening in that given week. Additionally, I can actually step directly into a simulation or simulate mode. On top of that, if you guys were on the webinars we've had in the past of our features within mobile, you can do things really quick, like I want to actually enter the model or step into the model. And so if I had rooms associated, I could do that, but I just selected a point and I'm going to go stand at that point. And I can actually use the gyroscope of my iPad to look around in the space. So if I'm actually standing on the project, I can jump to a point in time or a date and see what activity should be taking place by what's selected in purple there. Additionally, I can just jump to a particular date, like to today, or to the beginning or the end of the schedule. And in this case, I actually want to go through an animation and say I just want to play it from beginning. So while this simulates, I'm still within the model, kind of in the viewer, and I have the ability to look around, again, using kind of touch or gyroscopic motion of the tablet. And so I can kind of see the simulation, and across the top there you actually get the date, and if we want to pause at any point, I can stop and I can see what week I'm in, or if I wanted to roll up or drill down at this point to kind of more detail, I can jump to the day, or I can jump to the month and kind of step through that way. So a lot of really good stuff there, but I'm going to go ahead and stop the demonstration. We'll kind of come back around to this potentially later, and right now what I'd like to do is go ahead and dive right into our panel discussion. So again, I'll kind of drive through whether Mark, Kelsey, or Kasey is going to take the question. What we'd go ahead and what we'd like to go ahead and do is open up the question box for you guys to submit additional questions, but we do have a couple of questions that we had submitted before the webinar started. So we're going to start by taking some of those, and then again, feel free to submit your question, and we'll go from there. So Kasey, if you'll go ahead and kick us off and kind of talk in general about some of the biggest challenges that you see and what the industry is facing when it comes to staying on schedule.
Sure, I'm happy to take that one. What I see a lot in today's day and age with staying on schedule, I'm a bars on a page guy. I've been scheduling for a long time and been on a lot of job sites. And the biggest thing you get is you have different people within the project, within your own company, within sub-trades, unions, consultants, owners. And the biggest struggle I see is the overall buy-in of the original plan. So, you know, the general contractor will make the plan, and then everybody else is supposed to abide by it. Now, when it's bars on a page, it's easy for us to sit in a room and talk about the plan, and that's the Gantt chart, and that is the project schedule. You know, where I see technologies like 4D and using, you know, all of the technologies that we're using to show schedule in a different light, you know, I see much greater ability for us to get buy-in. So it's really, in my opinion, that initial buy-in of the plan. Not everybody necessarily gives it the full review that it should. Quite often you get lip service, just yes, that's fine. What I find with 4D is it's a fantastic visual tool to get better buy-in across the board.
Absolutely. I agree that as you're pulling up the visual, you get a lot more interaction, and the discussion becomes more real because you're looking at what's going to end up in place in the near term. Kelsey, anything from your point of view to add here?
No, I think that pretty much covered it. I mean, the only other thing that we're interested in using this for is actually, you know, for mobilization and for basically tracking production out on site. So we're, you know, we're really interested in those possibilities with Assemble and P6.
And I think part of kind of the mobilization and relating that to staying on schedule is how do you really share what that plan is out to everyone to make sure they're looking at it more consistently, more readily anyhow. So Mark, anything from your point of view here?
So when it comes to staying on schedule, the thing I've seen the most is having something that effectively communicates the plan of what is going to be done. And since tradespeople are very, you know, graphically oriented, you know, seeing the actual work in place, whatever tools that you can give them to better see that data in the sequence of the operations, the better off they're going to be.
With this, obviously, we're talking about bringing new technology to the field or changing the way people interact with the schedule data. What challenges do you each see as actually driving the adoption of a new product or a new feature set or really a brand new workflow to guys in the field? And this time I'll actually start with Kelsey. I know you guys at Skanska have really kind of structured and you personally have structured a way to start rolling out new technology. Why don't you jump in here and kick us off?
Yes, definitely. So we always start small and we try to build on our successes. That builds confidence in the technology, and so next time people out on site are actually asking and requesting for that technology instead of us trying to push it down on them. Now, as far as Assemble goes, we're really excited about the mobile app and being able to link that in with 4D. I think that's going to make it much easier to view in the field and easier to understand. And also there's that interaction piece where people in the field can actually go in, edit parameters in Assemble, and then have that information linked back. So they're going to be able to see, you know, the benefit of using this tool in real time.
With starting small, I think, and kind of thinking about some of the discussions we've had in the past of you know, things that you were doing with AR, VR, and connecting data from Assemble to that. Talk a little bit more about kind of the hands-on and what you did with the team that you were working with to make sure that you know, they're understanding or utilizing the concept or actually, you know, thinking about carrying it forward rather than you know, taking it and kind of leaving it on the shelf.
Yes, definitely. So we're trialing this on a 500,000 square foot hospital in Florida. That being said, though, we've only chosen 2 particular areas that we want to focus on instead of trying to do the entire project. We're just focusing on the exterior skin and then also the interior partition. So the exterior skin, we're focusing on mobilization. In an ideal world, we'd have 6 crews, but we're probably not going to end up having that out on site. So we're going to use this tool, you know, for 4D running the simulation to see what's the best and most efficient way that we can remobilize our crews. Now, for the interior partitions, we're actually going to have the superintendent walk around with the iPad, edit the parameters in Assemble, and say, yes, this has been installed, not installed, or in progress. And then that information is going to link back to our schedulers, and they can update the P6 schedule, and we'll know if we're, you know, on track or behind schedule.
Awesome. Kasey, anything to add from your point of view here?
I think what Kelsey said is absolutely on point there. You know, the question says, are there challenges you face with technology adoptions in the field? I think every construction company worldwide would say yes, absolutely. I mean, you're dealing with multi-generational knowledge, and sometimes change is a little bit scary, but Kelsey was absolutely right. Yeah, you know, the greatest sales tool you can have is success. If something is working in the field for one project team, or even down to one individual, construction people are funny in that when something works, they'll use it time and time again, and they'll tell their friends. And it's the quickest way for technology to spread across a company is to have that early, small success and build on it.
Absolutely, and I know, kind of coming from both of you, you guys are within mega organizations, and that can kind of be overwhelming sometimes. I know, you know, the audience kind of spans a big spectrum of sizes of organization, but if even you guys are saying start small, figure out your plan at a small scale and go from there, it totally makes sense, and that's something that really anyone can focus on. And obviously each project, it poses its own issues with how you actually get the project team engaged. But from a technology standpoint and from the assemble side, what we want to do is really simplify the process. And if I correlate this to sort of how assemble has really pushed to the estimating front, you know, I think estimators, just like you were saying, Kasey, and multi-generational approach. Estimators come from a lot of different areas and have already used a lot of different tools in the past, but we want to make it really easy for them to not require a ton of training. If you step out of it for a few days to, you know, forget where things are when you come back. And as we approach this, you know, the scheduling space and what we're doing with Mark's team, we want to make sure that we keep it as simple as possible. With that said, Mark, anything to add from your point of view here?
No, I think you and Kasey and Kelsey hit all the right points. The number one thing that I saw in leading project teams in their scheduling efforts is, you know, getting them to use the tool, making sure that the tool is set up in such a way that it is really simple for them to use so that they continue to use the tool. You know, construction people are all about, you know, simplicity, okay, being able to maximize their production efforts through whatever tool that they grab, whether it be a hammer, a saw, or whatever. And if you can develop and bring them to a solution that allows them to do it very simplistically, they'll adopt it. And the other things that I really like about our Assemble is its speed and its ability to quantify. Just the quantification process of how much of what commodity that they're going to install, having that information readily available to them so that they can determine the appropriate crew sizes and the durations to accomplish those. It's an excellent tool for their benefit.
So I just want to leave it with you for a minute. You're talking about simplicity and sharing information, making it simple for people to kind of continuously stay within the product, within you know, this data that's being provided. Next question I have in my mind is this is sort of a two-way street. You're able to, you know, give someone new data that they haven't seen before potentially. How, you know, part of that is basically how do you bring information back from the project team out on site and actually do a true progress status update. The project status kind of thing, or an activity status anyhow, I've seen it in a wide variety, from anywhere from just a wag of that looks like it's 50% to kind of minuscule details where you spend the entire month providing the monthly update, and everywhere in between. But what are some of the key things you see today in actually updating the schedule?
So it's, you know, when updating the schedule, I've always found that you're always targeting around one particular data date, and it's always a struggle to get the input from the multiple trades that are on site to see what they've actually done, when they've actually started, and how much remaining work they have to do, and trying to get all that information provided in such a time where it can be put into the schedule and updated, and then produce the current forecast. It's a very time-consuming process. So with Assemble's ability to be able to break down and quantify what the key elements are that are important, there's a lot of potential here to be able to take these components and get to the specific line item that you're looking for. You know, like let's say I'm building a wall and I'm just, you know, all I'm working on is the top track so far. To be able to quantify what that top track element is of that wall and say that portion of in what geographical location I am in, how % complete of it is installed, it will really facilitate that progress updating of the actual schedule. And then you can then extrapolate that to other components of, you know, that are associated with that model and do that real simplified approach to reporting those installed quantities.
Absolutely. And I know, you know, based on the discussions we've had to date, feature-wise, something that we're looking at is how do we update that status of, you know, if you have an activity that has 100 widgets and you've status 23 of them as done, how does that feed back to the status within P6? And we're definitely working on where we want to go with that being a feature and actually driving the update progress of the progress update back all the way to P6. So I saw a few questions coming in around features and what that relates to. So
I can say it from my end. It's a great question. You could probably have a full day webinar on this question alone, I think, in the industry. You know, I agree with everything that was said about challenges on updating project status. You do get anything from, you know, pie in the sky, 50% of something, down to very, very analytical data. But yeah, the key challenge absolutely is accuracy of your update. It's, you know, are you able to status a schedule based on quantifiable information?
That's right.
There's no reason to think if you haven't achieved a productivity to date that you will in the future. So status it accurately, and that's the best way to know, you know, if you're being true to the schedule and it's actually achievable. It's easy to lie to yourself. It's a lot tougher to actually put the truth down on paper and make adjustments accordingly from there.
That's right. And from my experience in that particular kind of path is, I know I've worked with superintendents that very much want to go by their gut, and they've done or built enough projects that they, you know, they can get a sense of things. And I know that that's true. On the flip side of that, most of us work in a situation where every project is totally different. And each project is faced with its own challenges. And the more, like you said, the more you can get down on paper, the more analytical you can be about what's going on the project. And you know, less often are you going to lie to yourself. And maybe what's down on paper is only telling part of the story. And what you need to do there is actually drive the conversation. And so that's where, in my mind, where we can definitely help. And what we're doing is not necessarily giving or providing the end-all, be-all of model-based scheduling or 4D, but it's about driving conversations and actually pushing the information forward to the people that are using it. So, Kelsey, anything from you?
No, I think that pretty much covers it for project status. But I guess a tangent to that, a really exciting feature we're looking at is also the slicer and the class editor, which Assemble has. So we'll be able to link, very, very accurately link our activities with the geometry in the model, because that's always a problem we run into when creating a 4D schedule. And so I think having that accuracy is also going to help us update the project status with being able to go in and choosing those individual pieces instead of having to just select the whole and say 100% when it's actually only 23% complete.
Sure, I totally agree with that. So this is a question coming in right now. Just going to jump right to it, sort of off of that. You talked a little bit about some of the other features coming through from Assemble and some of the things that we're working on. This is really kind of focused around the development of features. What are some specific problems you focused on to develop these features? I'll speak to this first, and I'll let Mark jump in with some of his insight to what we've talked about. But But generally speaking, we've, as best as we can, have gone out to hundreds of our customers and asked them what sort of problems they're facing today. And really, it's about sharing the information. It's about how do we better get people to actually use what we put in front of them, and how do we get them to contribute to the conversation. So a good example there would be, you go through the hours and hours of potential schedule integration to a model or set of models, and you produce this really great looking marketing video that steps through the schedule and shows how this project is going to be built, and then that ends up getting put on the shelf because the project team says, you know what, this is great, but that's not how we build the project. That we go to much more detail than you have here. So what we've really focused on, and Mark can weigh in on some of the things that that they're focusing on within. Really, the focus is how do we make this useful to those people, and just give little snippets that are useful at that given point in time. So, Mark, any examples or thoughts you have on how we've driven or kind of stepped through what features we want to focus on here?
Well, I think we're definitely focused on the people that are the heart and soul of the construction company. Okay, those are the people that actually do the building. To date, or from my experience of when I saw 4D scheduling, it was used mostly for a marketing issue to present to the owner that yes, we've thought about this, and this is how it actually will be constructed. But being able to disseminate that next step, getting it to those people that are closest to the work and actually doing that, and facilitate their reporting on what they do. I know when I was a field engineer, 20, 30 years ago, I spent one day a week just quantifying all of the work that I had installed, for that particular week to go into our performance report. So to be able to facilitate that and put that power into the end user's hands, where they can cut that effort down from a full day's effort down to it may be a continuous process at the end of each day, or a 1 hour process at the end of the week, that will allow them to have much more time focused in on what's really important, is actually doing the job itself.
Well, I just have the example that I mentioned earlier with the interior partitions. My account manager here came to me about 6 months ago and said, "Now, hey, is it possible to track the production of drywall? Can we track it in the 3D model and have it color coded what's been installed and not installed?" And I said, "Yes, we can definitely do that, but it's not going to be very easy or efficient or neat, and there might be better uses of my time and the scheduler and the superintendent." And so we decided not to do it. And now 6 months later, with Assemble, we have the technology, and we're getting to trial, what we wanted to do. And so I just think it's a great opportunity, and it's definitely, finding solutions for real problems out there in the field. Thanks,
Kelsey. Kasey, anything from you?
From my end, this question ties in, with the question that we just had, in that, as you're able to quantify things during your update cycle and quantify things within the model as progress happens, it makes your updates that much better. It all does tie together, and the more you can take this into the field, out of the office, the better. So you see the development of these features, and they all sort of go towards the same end goal, right? So pretty excited to try some of these.
I like this question because it kind of ties back to where's the industry going with this sort of stuff. And the question is the 3D-based schedule contractually agreed to within the project by the owner, GC, or the sub?
It's the 3D-based schedule contractually agreed to in the project by the owner, GC, sub. I, to date, have not had a 4D schedule a full contractual requirement, although if you think about it, the 4D schedule is just a visual representation of the project schedule. So, I mean, we're quite rigorous in our reviews of it to ensure that it is accurate. Going off on a little bit of a tangent, what it does for me quite often is it gives me a good quality check on my schedule. A over the years you get pretty good at reviewing your own work. However, the visual aspect of it shows you make mistakes. Everybody does, and this is a very quick and easy way to see it. So what it does is it ends up making the entire schedule a better quality document to the owner. I can see contractually, the BIM requirements and VDC requirements here in Canada, specifically Ontario where I work, are growing almost on a project-by-project basis. So I don't think this is that far off in the future, and wouldn't be surprised if full 4Ds are contractually required, although a lot of our owners do ask for them already, just not fully contractually.
Yeah, I think that it's difficult, and we talk about this often with our customers around really contractual obligations and things that are required to be part of the model that maybe aren't there, and to date a lot of discussion around if the design team is required to provide something within the model, how does the general contractor or the construction team utilize it, and what are the requirements there for turnover at the end of the project. But to date, I've not seen anything other than sort of a general, the spec says you're required to submit 4D visual, but I'm not sure. I think the contract structures are in flux now, and I know a lot of work is changing, and how in general and most sectors of the construction industry, work is becoming more either design build or CM at risk, or projects where the GC and potentially the main trades are involved very early on. More and more of that is becoming commonplace, and I've got a good next question that's coming in about that. But okay, Mark, have you seen anything today?
I have not seen anything where the 3D schedule itself is contractually agreed to between the owner, GC, and sub. I've seen it as a master plan, but that's basically represented just in the 2D schedule itself.
It's interesting too, because I think about how different regions across, in this case, specifically the United States, how different regions adopt this stuff differently, and how, and potentially medical projects might be pushing certain things that, or airport projects are pushing certain things because of just the facilities that are in the turnover at the end of the day, what's important at that point. But I think in general, it's taken sort of evangelists to push the use of models and to drive the use of 4D, and to really, and what we're talking about today is how do we put it in the hands of people that are going to use this information and continue to share it. And I think all of that feeds back into what are the contractual obligations, because the more value you prove out of this, and the more benefit that you show in general to the owner of using the 4D technology or an integration like this, the more they're going to begin to request it on a really more commonplace. So that's something that's been going on for really the last decade, and I think we are in this sort of place and time period now that I think it's the VDC teams that I talk to often say that they wear a dozen different hats, and they're pulled in a lot of different directions, because that content is so valuable in so many workflows across the project lifecycle, that as we can put that data directly in the hands of all of those individual workflows or users within those different departments, I think the more that we're going to see this happen in different contract structures. But to date, I think we're still scratching the surface. This is a little bit of a longer question, but as the BIM model is being built through the design process, there's really kind of the preliminary schedule driving towards a detailed baseline. So how do you develop the schedule from preliminary to detailed baseline along with the development of the BIM model? Should it be started and build out the 4D schedule from early on, or do you wait until the BIM model is completed? What's your take on this? I'll start with Kelsey in this case.
Well, I can say from the pre-construction side, as far as estimating goes, we just kind of build them in tandem. So, where there isn't information with the 3D model, we fill it in with the estimate. So I think it would be the same from the scheduling side. You just fill in the gaps early on with the information from doing this, from doing a variety of projects over time. And, as the model progresses and the schedule and the estimate progress, eventually they'll all meet at the end and come together.
In our department here, we do develop the schedule and the model and the 4D sort of all together at the same time. I know knowing that we're going to create a 4D does slightly alter the way that you build your schedule, and that you are building the schedule for the project, but also knowing that it has to link to a model. You might add a little more detail in an area, you might not need detail in a certain area, so you can cater your schedule development cycle to create a 4D pretty early. Now you can do the 4D as soon as you have enough detail in both the schedule and model, and then just keep appending as you get more detail, which is generally what we do. But you don't want to start too early. You don't want to start when you have virtually nothing. You want to have a decent enough model created and a decent enough schedule with enough information to build it properly. And then you can kind of go through the last, 20-30% of the bid process while you're doing this work, and really fine-tune it from there, both within the schedule and the model. The good news about doing it in conjunction with each other is you're able to manipulate either the model or schedule as needed. So if you're reviewing the 4D schedule and you see you need a little bit more detail in the schedule, well, you know what? That's good feedback. From the scheduler's point of view, I can tell you that's fantastic feedback, because it shows you an area that maybe you need to add a little bit more detail just to be a little bit more clear. And the same works in the model as well. If you get a model from a consultant that doesn't have a lot of detail, then it takes some effort to break it down into the detail needed within the schedule to create really that accurate 4D you want. So really for us, we do it together through the life cycle.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, and that it is kind of a team effort as you move through this. And in my mind, as we progress through sort of the feature set that we want to provide, that really we give the opportunity to the scheduler more and more for this to be directly part of their workflow. And just to kind of, if I'm looking at this question directly, and it says, in other words, should we start to build the 4D schedule? Should we wait to build the 4D schedule until the BIM model is completed? I'd say no. Get started as soon as you can. Start breaking things down. Kelsey can probably directly talk about the fact that they very early on in early iterations of models start breaking out areas or regions or cost codes or WBS structures, and using Assemble to help drive that. And as a feature in Assemble, we actually, all of your Assemble properties or specific properties that you create inside of Assemble carry forward on instances model version to model version. So if I update a model and I've already, the model contains a wall in revision 1, and now in revision 2 that same wall is in place, all of the properties that you've created there are going to be inherited in that next version and all the future versions. Now obviously, naming structures change, and you get more from, early on you're very generic things and you get more specific. So you definitely are going to fine tune those. But I think the earlier you start, then the less hurdle you have to get it in place when the project is really hitting the ground or really breaking ground. Kelsey, anything from you to add here? Yes,
and just the last thing I would add is that also speaking with your designers and just, relaying the type of information you need. We do a lot of design builds here, so that helps. We're working directly with the architect and the design team, so we can request that the model is built in a certain way. But even if you don't have that type of structure, you can still make requests and try to get the 3D models in a certain way that will benefit you. And especially if you convey that to the owner, they can go back and say, okay, design team, this is better for everybody. Let's work together. And we've been very successful just in the past just by communicating what we need.
Perfect. All right, and then before I jump to the next question, Mark, anything from you to add here?
Yeah, the thing I've seen that works very successfully in doing some of the 4D schedules is to break it up in phases the way that you're going to package up the work. So, you know, in construction where you typically have a site and foundations package that comes out very early on, you've got the detail that you need to be able, that you have from the model and the design that's progressed for that. It supports a more detailed oriented 4D schedule. Likewise, when you have the next phase that comes in, which is the superstructure and the exterior skin, that can follow on. So you can build the level of detail as your design progresses through the duration of the job with the overlapping between the design process and the construction process.
That's absolutely perfect. And that actually stepping into our next question that we have queued up here. And I do apologize, we're bouncing around a bit. We have a ton of questions coming in today. And I think this is really relevant to the work that you know, most all of us do on a day-to-day basis, whether, you know, and Mark and I, we're building software, and most of you guys on the call are building buildings. But in general, it's relevant on a day-to-day basis here. So I'm loving this. But next question though is sort of to what you were talking about, Mark, is how's the industry moving toward integrating a schedule work breakdown structure and an estimating work breakdown structure? And I think this to me relates to, you know, different efforts in creating a kind of a common coding schema or breakdown schema across how you set things up in Precon and then how you carry that into the schedule. So Kelsey, do you want to jump in on this from kind of the pre-construction department point of view?
So as I mentioned before, when we have a design build project, we get with the architect straight away and we give them our different you know, cost codes or WVS breakdown. And they basically structure the model in a way that we can divide it by those different departments. So it makes it very, very easy for us to estimate. Generally, the schedule is also, you know, related to that. And the way that you're going to build is generally, you know, related to the way that we break down the cost codes. So it's very, very easy to sort of link one with the other.
Yeah, that's great. And I know you say it's very, very easy. I think this is a difficult problem to solve. I think I think it is an interesting thought and concept, and I know that it's varying levels of detail and varying levels of work, and I think that you know, as we drive towards it and the industry is sort of pushing for this common schema. I know before the construction company I worked for prior to Assemble, in cases that we weren't using models, we were building out these crazy code structures to try and link these things and have like the same coding that you're using for pre-con or for estimating as and buyout as what you're doing for scheduling and building. And it seems so crazy, but as soon as you introduce the model to that, it becomes, you have essentially this opportunity to do what in the past was like a sort of a many items to many items or many to many relationship. And now you've created, because of the model objects, you've got this many to one or one to many. And that simplifies the process so much. So really kind of shifting over from the scheduling point of view, Kasey, what are your thoughts on where the industry is going with this?
Whomever asked this question must have seen more or less what I was working on all morning before this webinar, because this is becoming a very real requirement in our day-to-day, a contractual requirement at that. You know, I'm currently working on a very large bid schedule with a quite large consortium here in Toronto, and this is a contractual requirement that the work breakdown structure in the schedule will match the estimate work breakdown structure. Now this, of course, you know, not everybody uses full earned value, and that's a totally different webinar as well. But once you start getting into proper progress tracking and proper project controls like that, really this is, I mean, this is the general pyramid of project controls, right? Estimate, schedule, and cost you need that commonality across all three. And once you achieve that, you know, going back to the earlier question about project statusing and the good information in and out, this is all very good information when it speaks to each other. So the easier you can make this, the better your project controls are, not just in estimate and schedule, but in your cost control and your forecasting. It becomes a very, very powerful tool once it's all, you know, kind of apples to apples compared.
Absolutely. And Mark, from your point of view, anything to add here?
The thing I've found over the years is that the schedule is broken apart and organized in a different level of detail than the estimate or the budget is broken down. So when I see this question, I paraphrase it into what I call cost and schedule integration. Tracking your cost and managing your costs the way you do in your current cost management system, and then using your schedule to identify the activities of the way you'll actually build it, which may be a composite of those different elements. And just being able to get from your budget source or your estimating source to the schedule and the way you're going to be building it through a series of assignments and getting that breakdown is where we want to go.
So we are rapidly running out of time here, and I do want one more question. So let's start back with you, Kelsey.
Well, I guess it depends on how far ahead you're looking. But I guess very, very far in the future, you know, I think, you know, AI and machine learning and generative design, I think that's really going to shape, you know, change the way we build. And once that's combined with sort of 3D printing and robotics, I think we could see, you know, a brand new, you know, completely transform the industry. So I'm really excited to learn a bit more about that. And in the near term, just, you know, we're definitely working with AR and VR a lot of the time, and really on the pre-construction side, really looking at true pre-construction services. So like you mentioned, you know, linking all of this information together, the schedule and the estimates, and you know, providing true pre-construction services.
What about you, Kasey?
Well, I'm going to focus really on the first word in the question is where do you see the future of technology in construction, and I'm going to approach it a little different way. And the where to me is on-site. All of the technologies are leading towards more use on-site, the people on the tools, not even in the site trailer. I mean on the site, live on the site, whether it's the model, the schedule, the cost, the productivities. All technologies seem to be leading down the same road of being easily accessible to the workers on the site. The more, you know, in the last however many years, the more you can take from an office to a site environment, the better, and the more productive people will be. There's a lot of efficiencies you can have by tying a lot of these technologies together. You know, this entire webinar was tying the model to the schedule. That's, you know, that's one, or that's two technologies that we're tying together. But the more that you can tie together and bring to the field, I think that, you know, there's limitless possibility there for the future, for sure.
That's fantastic. And I'd say, kind of focusing on that where, in my mind, you say the field, but I truly say anywhere. And that the more and more we move into cloud-based computing and mobile technology and drone-based things and other systems that are, you know, bringing more devices to the hands of the workers, the builders, the more you're actually feeding that information anywhere you are. And so the site might be 100 miles away from a fabrication facility. That's 100 miles away from the owner of the project. That's, somewhere in between all of them is the general contractor, and all the individual trades are in different places as well. And in my mind, where is it going? It's actually, if you look at the background of this image, it's just kind of a general networking diagram. And I think that it is anywhere that, you know, you get information shared directly to your pocket. You've got a mobile device right there, and you can check in on the status of a job at any point in time from anywhere. And guys on the field have the other teams that are connected from elsewhere providing feedback and information directly to what's going on their day-to-day basis. So I echo that sentiment that it's on the job site, but it's in my mind, it's also anywhere you are. So Mark, do you have anything to wrap with there?
I'm going to add one element to this one. It's the who, and I think you've already talked about it. But again, empowering the people that are closest to the work and know how it needs to be assembled and put together in the proper sequencing at the really excruciating level of detail, empowering those people to actually author the short interval building information schedule solution is where the technology is going from my perspective.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mark. And just to wrap here, I apologize we've run long, but what I want to do is actually say a sincere thank you to Mark, Kelsey, and Kasey for taking the time today, and for everyone online to thank you as well for sticking with us here.